It is 11:05 p.m. on Monday, May 12th. I think I have pretty much finished my CS presentation, and probably after this I'll record it for class, and hopefully, depending or not if I have to do an oral exam, because I'm surprised I have not heard anything about when those will be, and I'm afraid that I've missed something, but I can take the entire day off tomorrow before I start studying Monday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Thursday. But it's not what I want to talk about, because recently I watched a really good video on, video games in general by Rasputin. I don't know if people know him by name. He's the guy with a bag over the head, talks really well about video games. And it brought up something that I have always been interested in talking about, but never really knowing how to. And I've mentioned this before, but my favorite video game of all time is Breath of the Wild. And not a lot of people necessarily share that opinion. One of the biggest examples I can think of is Coney, another YouTuber who has been vehemently against Breath of the Wild and how it is not a good game. But I just love it so much. And that really brings the idea of, art is subjective, but it's also a really big point is that art is in the eye of the beholder. It's based on your experiences. Breath of the Wild was my first Legend of Zelda game that I've ever played. And I know I talk about video games all the time. I talk about how I want to do it, but I got pretty late into video games in my life. Like, sure, I played Wii with my family. I had a Wii U. I had a DS. I was a Nintendo boy when I was younger. But I never played video games that much. Like, I would go over to my friend's house and I would play COD. I'd play Halo. I would do all those things, but those aren't parts of my childhood. The biggest part of my childhood for video games is Mario Kart 8, where I would come home, I would play Mario Kart 8 for an hour, and then I would go do homework. Then I would go play hockey or soccer or lacrosse or whatever. And that was what I did when I was a child. And really, probably around 9th grade, I started really getting into video games. So my perception on a lot of video games are pretty different than people who've played for a longer time. The biggest thing is with Breath of the Wild. I remember the biggest complaints about Breath of the Wild are that the dungeons weren't good. And when you say dungeons, you mean Divine Beasts and Ganon's or the Hyrule's Castle. But that never came across to me that way. I really enjoyed the mechanics of the Divine Beasts when I was playing them. Hyrule Castle was an amazing dungeon because it was so massive. It never was an issue. And that got me thinking, is that why I think that? And it really has come down to, I just never played another Legend of Zelda game, so I don't know what those games' dungeons should be like. And I was able to see past a flaw that a majority of people had with the game just because I have not had an experience with something different. And when I got to Tears of the Kingdom, it just, I would argue that Tears of the Kingdom is a little bit worse than Breath of the Wild. Maybe that is definitely a bias because of my memories and fondness around just when I played the game. But, I don't know, it felt a little bit more clunky to me than Breath of the Wild. But those dungeons in that game were an improvement in my perspective. Even though people still say, well, they're not really that great, because if you look at the other dungeons, and I'm like, I've never played any of those. And then Rasputin brought up a really, really good point, is that he was talking about this game, A Short Climb, or A Short Hike, I forget what it is, really cute little game, and versus Breath of the Wild, and we say, which one is better? And I believe that the answer is, you can't answer that. there comes a point in art in general where if something is so significantly different than another piece of media, then they're not comparable. When you play that game, you have to put on a different lens than if you play that other one. Like if I'm playing, let's say, Hollow Knight or Celeste, those games feel the same. They're comparable. While Celeste may be platforming, Hollow Knight's platforming, there's a dash, there's double jumps. Maybe Hollow Knight's a little bit more combat focused, but in my mind, those two are comparable. But there is no way I can compare Celeste and Elden Ring and say which game is better. Because there is no answer that you can define to say, this is the reason that Elden Ring is better without putting in your own personal opinion on, I think this type of game is better. There's no subjective truth. And this bleeds farther away than just video games. Like when I talk about like TV shows, there is no definitive, this is my favorite TV show. This is my favorite action TV show. This is my favorite slice of life TV show. It's my favorite fantasy TV show. Same goes for movies. Like I would say 1917, my favorite wartime movie. But that also is really close with Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket, and All Quiet on the Western Front. My favorite comedy is probably low-key The Big Year. That because we watched it with friends at boarding school. And I would say favorite fantasy one, Lord of the Rings. Favorite sci-fi. I can't even think of that right. Favorite sci-fi long time ago used to be Ender's Game, but there's so many there's nothing you can compare between those things. Same for songs. This is what I really find interesting about music, is that I will say right now my favorite song is Goodbye Everyone by Shinomoto. But right now it's kind of going a little bit closer to maybe Drifting Away by Adian or Be Here With Me Now by MC40. And really, you can't compare. Like, it changes so much. It's based on perspective. It's just based on which I enjoy more in the current moment. And I love this idea of how art is so subjective. But I think people kind of conflate the idea with art being subjective with, like, this type of which is better. Because there gets to a point where people say, oh, art is subjective, you just don't get it. Where it's not now a point of this person just doesn't like this. It comes to a point of, I would say, more competition. Or so, I want to say just more slop, I guess. That really comes down to, like, there is still subjectiveness to it. Like, is hardcore EDM a good genre? Probably subjectively, no. Objectively, probably still no. But there's people that are still going to like that. Or is like heavy death metal a good genre? I would say no, and most people would say no. But there's still people that like it. But it gets to a point where some things are just bad and some things are just good. But that really gets really niche categories. And I want to go back to video games. Is that it's also like, I love this idea of that games are good to people because, like, let's say Elden Ring again. People who like Elden Ring like a certain type of game. People who like Metroid or Castlevania like Metroidvanias. People who like Celeste like platformers. People who like Stardew Valley like farming and cozy games. And it's all subjective. It's all what different people like. And there's no way to compare games and say which one is better. There's no way to compare songs to say which one is better because it's all down to taste. And it's so interesting because, again, Breath of the Wild, those dungeons were fun because I liked those dungeons and had no prior experience to what a real Legend of Zelda dungeon is like. So therefore, that is my baseline of a good dungeon. Whereas people who played Breath of the Wild before, or Legend of Zelda games before, have had their baseline of good dungeon be something else from Wind Waker or Ocarina of Time or something like that. And it's so cool to have that difference in opinion just based on your past experience or your personal preference. It's so cool to me. And it all just stemmed from watching this Rasputin video, because I love Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, but some people's don't like it. They don't think it should be a top game of all time, even though I heavily disagree. I think it redefined an open world genre and produced many, many different copycats, but was so innovative that it just created an entire genre to itself. Like Elden Ring, I don't think would have been a thing if Breath of the Wild didn't happen. There's no way that a game like that, with that style of open worldness and choice and exploration, could be a thing. And now I'm just rambling about why I think Breath of the Wild is good, but I don't know, it's so fun to think about not necessarily just the differences in opinions of games and such because of personal preference, but also based on past experiences. Like, Nine Souls is an amazing game, but I don't think I would have liked it as much if I didn't play Hollow Knight before. If that was my first experience, I think I would have been increasingly frustrated with how the gameplay was utilized, because I would not have understood it more. And it's so fun to think about how like with music even, or movies, is that everything is subjective, and it makes it so that nothing really is comparable. I mean, there is a point where something does become objectively better. Like, one of my friends, we had an argument, or I would say friends, one of my teammates in boarding school had an argument. They said the Transformers series was better than the Lord of the Rings series. And that is objectively false. The Transformers as a film is not better than Lord of the Rings as a series. But to him, it is. And I just find that so cool. And that's so weird to say, but there are people who like Balatro. I tried playing Balatro. I can't really get into it. Slay the Spire, I can't really get into it. But I love Risk of Rain. I loved Neon Abyss when it was older. I love a bunch of these roguelikes. But I can't get into the deck-building roguelites. And yet people rave about it. Balatro was nominated for Game of the Year. And it's just so interesting. So, all right. Now I gotta go do my comp sci homework. And, maybe I'll play some golf tomorrow. Or maybe I'll just sit in my room and play video games for the entire day.